In just 47 seconds, Bill Barr smugly dismissed Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's question about Justice Department ethics. But what happened next made the entire courthouse freeze in disbelief. The evidence she quietly placed on the table would shatter his legacy in an instant. The federal courthouse looked almost unnaturally pristine that morning, like a museum dedicated to justice. That hadn't seen the real thing in years. Marble floors reflected the overhead lights with an antiseptic gleam. American flags stood sentinel behind the bench, stiff and unmoving as if they too were holding their breath. The microphones on each table blinked red, marking targets for the words about to fly across the room. This wasn't just a congressional hearing. This was the culmination of months of whispers, denials, and buried truths. And at its center stood two figures locked in a quiet battle that was about to explode onto screens across America. Jasmine Crockett entered with measured steps. No dramatic entrance, just the steady rhythm of someone who knew exactly what ground she stood on. Her navy suit was crisp, professional, the armor of a woman who came prepared for war but wouldn't need to shout to win it. The folder she carried seemed ordinary enough, but she held it with the careful precision of someone transporting nitroglycerin. On the other side sat Bill Barr, former Attorney General, leaning back with the comfortable posture of a man who had navigated these waters before. His half-smile suggested mild amusement rather than concern. After all, he had faced congressional questioning dozens of times. What could possibly be different today? The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about one man's testimony or one department's decisions. This was about whether power could truly be held accountable, whether evidence could still speak louder than influence. And in less than 2 minutes, America was about to find out. If you believe in accountability and the power of truth, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more moments when justice finally catches up to power. The truth you're about to witness won't just shock you. It might restore your faith in the system. Before becoming the fierce Congresswoman America was about to witness in action, Jasmine Crockett had built her reputation methodically, brick by brick. A former criminal defense attorney who had seen firsthand how justice bends under pressure, she brought to Congress not just credentials, but lived experience. The daughter of a school teacher and a military veteran, she had learned early that truth wasn't just a concept, it was a battle worth fighting. Congresswoman Crockett. "You have 5 minutes for questioning," announced the committee chair. Jasmine nodded, her expression unreadable. Those who knew her recognized this calm, not as hesitation, but as the stillness of a sniper before taking the shot. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," she began, voice steady and measured. "Mr. Barr, I'd like to discuss the Justice Department's handling of the Mueller investigation findings." Across social media, viewers were already leaning closer to their screens. Twitter erupted with the hashtag #Crockett questions trending within minutes. Her reputation for precision questioning had turned these hearings into must-watch events. Barr adjusted his glasses with practiced nonchalance. "I'm happy to discuss my published summary and decisions, Congresswoman." What the cameras caught, and what would later be freeze-framed across news networks, was the slight twitch of Barr's left eyebrow. Those familiar with interrogation techniques recognized it instantly, the micro-expression of someone preparing a rehearsed defense. The history between these two figures went deeper than today's hearing. 3 years earlier, when Barr had released his 4-page summary of the 448-page Mueller report, Crockett had been among the first legal experts to publicly question its accuracy. Back then, she wasn't yet in Congress, just a respected attorney whose analysis went viral when she methodically identified 7 critical omissions in Barr's summary. "Mr. Barr, you've previously testified that your summary of the Mueller report, and I quote, fully captured the essence of the original document. Do you stand by that statement today?" Barr leaned forward slightly, his confidence evident. "I do, Congresswoman. My summary was accurate and appropriate." The C-SPAN feed caught a Democratic congressman 2 seats down from Crockett sliding a note toward her. The cameras couldn't capture what it said, but her slight nod suggested confirmation of something already known. And you've also stated that Special Counsel Mueller expressed no objection to your characterization of his findings, correct? That's correct, Barr replied, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. We discussed the matter, and he understood my approach. Behind Barr, his team of Justice Department attorneys remained stone-faced. But one, a younger woman with rimless glasses, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. What viewers didn't know yet was that Jasmine Crockett had spent the previous 3 months quietly building a case. Not for the courts, but for this very moment. Her staff had meticulously traced document trails, interviewed former DOJ officials, and assembled a timeline that existed nowhere else in public record. The folder she had brought with her contained evidence that had never seen daylight. 3 separate documents, each more damning than the last, and the final one, the one she kept tapping gently with her index finger, contained something that would change everything. One final question before we move to specifics. Mr. Barr, she said, voice dropping slightly, do you recall receiving any written communication from Special Counsel Mueller expressing concerns about your summary in the days following its release? Barr's pause lasted exactly 2.4 seconds, a lifetime in congressional testimony. He may have sent some procedural notes. Nothing substantial. Jasmine Crockett didn't smile. She didn't need to. The hook was set. The room temperature seemed to drop as Crockett opened her folder with deliberate slowness. No dramatic flourish, just the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what card she was about to play. Mr. Barr, I'd like to enter into the record a document marked Exhibit A, she said, signaling to a staff member who began distributing copies to committee members. This is a letter sent by Special Counsel Robert Mueller to you, dated March 27, 2019, 3 days after you released your summary. The rustle of papers filled the silent chamber. Barr's face remained impassive, but his right hand gripped his pen with newly whitened knuckles. For the benefit of those watching, Crockett continued, I'll read the key paragraph. The summary letter the department sent to Congress and released to the public late in the afternoon of March 24th did not fully capture the context, nature and substance of this office's work and conclusions. There is now public confusion about critical aspects of the results of our investigation. This threatens to undermine a central purpose for which the department appointed the special counsel, to assure full public confidence in the outcome of the investigations. The words fell like hammers in the silent room. Camera shutters clicked in rapid succession, capturing the exact moment Bill Barr's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. Congresswoman, he began. But Crockett wasn't finished. Mr. Barr, this directly contradicts your testimony to Congress on April 9, 2019, when Senator Van Hollen asked you, did Bob Mueller support your conclusion? Your answer was, and I quote, I don't know whether Bob Mueller supported my conclusion. She let the contradiction hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. Yet this letter clearly shows that not only did Mueller not support your conclusion, he formally objected to it in writing. Would you like to explain this discrepancy to the committee? The first signs of discomfort crossed Barr's face, not in dramatic contortions, but in the tightening around his eyes, the subtle shifting in his chair. The room held its collective breath. The letter expresses some procedural concerns about presentation, not substance, Barr replied, his voice steady but lacking its earlier ease. Mueller's team wanted more context included. This wasn't a substantive disagreement. Crockett's expression didn't change, but her finger moved to tap a second document in her folder. Let's move to Exhibit B, she said, as another set of papers made its way around the room. This is an internal DOJ memo dated March 28, 2019, the day after Mueller's letter. It summarizes a phone call between you and Special Counsel Mueller. Social media was exploding. Twitter users reported the platform slowing under the weight of Barr-exposed hashtags. CNN cut away from all other coverage. Fox News hosts looked visibly uncomfortable as they narrated the unfolding scene. The memo states, and I quote, S.C. Mueller emphasized that the summary failed to mention the second stage of the obstruction analysis, which addresses why the president's actions would constitute obstruction if they were not protected by his position. S.E. Mueller described this omission as transforming the understanding of the report's findings in a way that undermines the careful work of the special counsel's office. Democrat across the aisle whispered something to her colleague that caused both to glance sharply at Barr. A Republican committee member frantically flipped through the document, searching for context to soften the blow. Barr's response came slower this time. These were internal deliberations about messaging, Congresswoman. The department has the authority to determine how findings are presented. Messaging, Mr. Barr, or misrepresentation? Crockett's question cut through his explanation like a blade. Because these documents show that the author of the report formally objected to your characterization of it, both in writing and verbally. Yet you testified to Congress that you didn't know Mueller's position on your summary. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It had weight, substance. Even the most partisan members of the committee seemed to recognize the gravity of the moment. This wasn't political theater anymore. It was the sound of accountability finding its voice. I'd like to enter Exhibit C, Crockett continued, her tone unchanged despite the tension crackling through the room. This time, her aide handed a single document directly to the committee chair, who studied it with widening eyes before passing it along. This exhibit contains notes from Annie Donaldson, then Chief of Staff to White House Counsel Don McGahn. The notes were taken during a meeting between White House officials and Department of Justice representatives on March 26, 2019, 2 days after your summary was released. As copies made their way around the room, gasps could be heard from several committee members. A senior Republican congressman removed his glasses in disbelief. Ms. Donaldson's notes quote you, Mr. Barr, stating, "We need to control the narrative on this report. The president's satisfaction with our approach is critical. Mueller's people are unhappy, but they don't control this process." "We do." The room erupted. Several members began speaking at once. The chairman pounded his gavel repeatedly, struggling to restore order. Cameras panned across shocked faces, both Democratic and Republican. When relative quiet returned, Crockett continued, her composure unbroken amidst the chaos. "Mr. Barr, these notes directly suggest that your handling of the Mueller report was motivated by political considerations rather than a commitment to justice or truth. Would you care to explain to this committee why you were concerned with the president's satisfaction rather than accurate representation of a federal investigation's findings?" Barr's face had transformed. The comfortable confidence was gone, replaced by a rigid mask of professional crisis management. His legal training was kicking in. Damage control, limited admissions, qualified denials. Those notes lack context, Congresswoman. They represent one person's interpretation of complex discussions about prosecutorial authority and executive privilege. They represent contemporaneous documentation of your own words. "Mr. Barr," Crockett corrected him, her voice gaining an edge for the first time. "Words that reveal your priority was pleasing the president, not serving justice." Barr leaned toward his microphone. "My duty has always been to uphold the law as I understand it. The decisions I made were based on your understanding of the law?" Crockett interrupted, the first hint of fire showing through her controlled exterior. "Let's discuss that understanding. Because Exhibit D shows something even more troubling." The committee chairman looked startled. "Congresswoman, the committee has only received 3 exhibits." "My apologies, Mr. Chairman," she replied, reaching back to receive a final document from her aide. "This evidence was only confirmed this morning. I'd like permission to enter it now." After a brief consultation with committee counsel, the chairman nodded. "You may proceed." As the final document circulated, the entire dynamic of the room shifted. Republican members huddled with their staffers. Democratic members sat forward in their seats. And Bill Barr, for perhaps the first time in his public career, looked genuinely alarmed. "Exhibit D is an email sent from your private account to White House counsel Pat Cipollone on March 23, 2019, the day before your summary was released. In it you write, 'Pat, draft attached for review.' Let me know if this achieves what we discussed. The President should find this satisfactory while technically staying within bounds. Even the cameras seemed to hold still, focusing on Barr's face as the implications of the email settled across the room. Attached to this email was an early draft of what would become your 4-page summary, a draft that shows substantial edits based on White House feedback, not Department of Justice analysis. Twitter was on fire. Major news sites crashed under traffic surges. The live YouTube stream of the hearing gained over 200,000 viewers in less than 5 minutes. Barr's attorney, seated behind him, frantically wrote notes and pushed them forward. But Barr seemed frozen, caught between legal training and the undeniable evidence before him. "Mr. Barr," Crockett said, a voice now carrying the weight of history, "did you submit your characterization of the Mueller report to the White House for approval before releasing it to Congress and the American people?" The silence stretched for what felt like minutes, but was actually just 12 excruciating seconds. "That email," Barr finally said, voice noticeably strained, "appears to be taken out of context from broader discussions about executive privilege. Review, the email specifically, mentions achieving something you discussed, and making sure the President would find it satisfactory." What exactly was discussed, Mr. Barr? What exactly needed to be satisfactory to the President about your supposedly independent summary? Before Barr could formulate a response, Crockett delivered the final blow. "And can you explain why the draft attached to your email contains track changes and comments from an account identified as WH Counsel, showing that the White House directly edited your summary of an investigation into the President himself?" The room was so silent you could hear the air conditioning hum. Then, like a dam-breaking, chaos erupted. Several members demanded to speak. Journalists rushed from the room to file breaking stories. Barr's attorneys huddled around him in visible crisis mode. Through it all, Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still, watching as the truth she had meticulously assembled finally found its voice. The chairman's gavel couldn't restore order for nearly 3 minutes. When relative calm finally returned, all eyes remained fixed on the dramatic confrontation unfolding before them. "Mr. Barr," Crockett continued, her voice somehow both softer and more powerful, "would you like to correct your previous testimony to Congress now?" Bill Barr, the man who had served as Attorney General under 2 presidents, the legal mind who had navigated countless political storms, sat uncharacteristically silent. His team of attorneys whispered urgently in his ear, but he seemed to be processing something beyond their advice. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its commanding presence. "Congresswoman, these documents require careful review. I cannot speak to their authenticity or context without proper examination." "These documents," Crockett responded, "have been authenticated by the Department of Justice Inspector General's office, by forensic email analysts, and by 3 separate witnesses who have provided sworn affidavits." She tapped her folder. "All of which are included in the committee's packet." The reaction across the room was immediate and visible. Republican members who had been preparing defenses suddenly looked at their copies with new interest. Democratic members exchanged glances that conveyed a single message. "This is real." Bill Barr exposed is already trending at #1 on Twitter. A junior congressman whispered loudly enough to be picked up by nearby microphones. The comment would later become a viral clip of its own. CNN's Chiron changed to breaking DOJ misled Congress on Mueller. Report. Fox News opted for the more cautious, controversial documents presented in Barr hearing. MSNBC didn't mince words with bombshell White House. Edited Mueller summary. Crockett wasn't done. With the precision of a surgeon, she pivoted from exposure to examination. "Mr. Barr, these documents establish 3 critical facts," she said, counting them off on her fingers. "First, you received explicit written objections from Special Counsel Mueller about your characterization of his report. Second, you subsequently testified to Congress that you didn't know Mueller's position on your summary. And third, you allowed the subject of the investigation, the White House, to edit your public characterization of that investigation's findings." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. Any one of these would constitute a serious breach of public trust. Together, they suggest a pattern of deliberate deception, not just of Congress, but of the American people. The symbolic power of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. A black woman congressman methodically dismantling the carefully constructed narrative of one of the most powerful legal figures in recent history, using nothing but evidence and precision. Sit down. Barr began trending at number 3 nationally, with users sharing the clip of Crockett's methodical questioning alongside captions like, "She came with receipts." And this is what accountability looks like. Bill Barr finally found his footing, the legal mind reasserting itself through the shock. Congresswoman, you're presenting complex legal and procedural matters as if they were simple ethical questions. The relationship between the Department of Justice and the White House involves nuanced considerations of executive privilege and— Mr. Barr, Crockett interrupted, her tone carrying an edge that cut through his explanation. Is it your position that executive privilege includes the right of a president to edit the Department of Justice's characterization of an investigation into his own conduct? The question hung in the air like a suspended verdict. A veteran Republican congressman, visibly troubled, broke protocol to speak directly to Barr. I'd advise careful consideration before answering, Bill. The committee chairman, recognizing the historic gravity of the moment, did not admonish the interruption. Barr looked down at the documents, then at his attorneys, then back to Crockett. For the first time, uncertainty showed clearly on his face. The department has certain obligations to the president as head of the executive branch, he began, his words coming slowly. Those obligations include your obligation, Mr. Barr, Crockett said, her voice now carrying the moral authority that transcended political divides, was to the truth and to the American people, not to a president's preferred narrative. Something in the room shifted. It wasn't just partisan lines rearranging, it was something more fundamental. The abstract concept of accountability was suddenly made concrete, visible in real time. The chairman spoke into the weighted silence. The gentlewoman's time has expired, but given the extraordinary nature of these revelations, the chair will allow the witness to respond fully. All eyes turned to Barr, whose demeanor had transformed. Gone was the confident legal strategist. In his place sat a man confronting the unexpected collapse of a carefully constructed reality. These documents, he said finally, present certain communications in a light that doesn't reflect the full context of departmental deliberations. I maintain that my actions were within appropriate legal boundaries, though I acknowledge that reasonable people might disagree about the wisdom of certain decisions. It was as close to a concession as anyone had ever heard from Bill Barr Crockett. Recognizing the historic significance of even this limited acknowledgement, simply nodded. She didn't need to press further. The evidence had spoken more eloquently than any cross-examination could. As the chairman called for a brief recess, the courthouse erupted. Journalists sprinted from the room, phones already pressed to their ears. Social media exploded with clips spreading faster than platforms could track them. Legal analysts on every network struggled to convey the magnitude of what had just transpired, and through it all, Jasmine Crockett gathered her documents with the same careful precision she had shown in presenting them. She didn't need to celebrate or grandstand. The truth had done that work for her. When the hearing resumed 30 minutes later, the world outside had already transformed. The story had spread beyond political circles into the mainstream consciousness. Jasmine Crockett receipts was trending in over 150 cities. Major news organizations had interrupted regular programming for special coverage. But the most telling reaction came from within the hearing room itself. As members returned to their seats, the typical partisan battle lines had blurred. Republicans and Democrats alike approached Crockett, examining the documents, asking questions in hushed tones. Several senior Republicans declined to return to the dais, choosing instead to watch from the back of the room, a silent but powerful statement. Barr's legal team had doubled in size during the recess. With 3 additional attorneys now huddled around him, their urgent whispers conveyed the gravity of the situation better than any commentary could. The chairman called the hearing back to order, his voice carrying a weight that transcended routine procedure. Before we continue with questioning, the chair recognizes the ranking member for a statement. The ranking Republican member, a 30-year veteran of Congress known for his partisan loyalty, approached the microphone slowly. His face showed the strain of a man caught between political allegiance and professional ethics. "Mr. Chairman," he began, "in light of the extraordinary evidence presented today, I believe this committee has a constitutional duty that transcends party considerations. I am therefore requesting a special bipartisan investigative committee to examine these documents fully and report their findings to the full House." The murmurs that swept through the room weren't partisan outrage, but collective recognition of a historic pivot point. When accountability breaks through, it changes not just outcomes, but the very nature of the conversation. Outside the courthouse, crowds had gathered spontaneously, drawn by the viral clips spreading across social media. Signs hastily made on notebook paper and cardboard read, "Truth Matters," and Crockett brought receipts. News helicopters circled overhead, capturing aerial shots of the growing assembly that would lead evening broadcasts nationwide. Inside, the chairman acknowledged the ranking member's request with a solemn nod. The chair appreciates the ranking member's statement and seconds the motion for a special bipartisan committee. We will proceed with scheduling after this hearing concludes. The remainder of the session continued with questioning from other members, but the energy had fundamentally shifted. Democrats were measured rather than triumphant. Republicans were reflective rather than defensive. The evidence had changed the chemistry of the room. Bill Barr answered the remaining questions with careful legal precision, neither admitting wrongdoing nor maintaining his earlier certainty. His reputation as the unflappable legal strategist had been permanently altered, not through partisan attacks, but through the methodical presentation of his own words and actions. As the hearing concluded, cameras captured what would become the defining image of the day. Jasmine Crockett walking from the chamber, surrounded by members of both parties. Her expression not of victory but of solemn purpose fulfilled. CNN's chief legal analyst summed it up. What we witnessed today wasn't just a congressional hearing. It was accountability in its purest form, evidence speaking truth to power. And Congresswoman Crockett's approach will be studied in law schools for decades. The reverberations extended far beyond politics. Bring receipts became a cultural phenomenon overnight. Schools reported classroom discussions about evidence and truth. Legal organizations noted surges in application inquiries. Something fundamental had shifted in the public consciousness. 3 days later, the Washington Post's front page featured a striking image, a young black girl holding a hand-drawn sign at a spontaneous gathering outside the Capitol. It read simply, "Be like Jasmine." The story wasn't just about one hearing or one official. It was about the enduring power of evidence, the quiet strength of preparation, and the transformative potential of truth spoken clearly. In her district office the following week, Congresswoman Crockett found her staff sorting through thousands of letters and emails. They came from every state, every demographic, every political persuasion, all expressing variations of the same sentiment. "Thank you for showing us what accountability looks like." One letter in particular caught her attention. From a retired judge in Minnesota, it contained just 3 sentences. "I've been in courtrooms for 40 years and never seen evidence presented with such precision and power." You didn't just hold one man accountable. You reminded an entire nation what justice is supposed to look like. Crockett placed the letter on her desk and looked out at the people gathered in her waiting room, citizens who had traveled from across the country just to express their gratitude in person. She understood that what had happened wasn't about her skill or courage. It was about what happens when truth is given a clear, unwavering voice. The legacy of that day would extend far beyond political consequences or legal ramifications. It would remind Americans that accountability isn't partisan. It's essential. That evidence doesn't care about power or position. That truth, when presented with clarity and precision, still has the power to change the course of history. If this story moved you, if you believe that truth still matters in our democracy, please like, share, and subscribe. Not just to support our content, but to show that there's an audience hungry for accountability in all its forms. Together, we can ensure that the light of evidence continues to shine into the darkest corners of power. Because the truth doesn't just expose, it transforms.